A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood along the shore. And he spoke to them at length in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground, where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit, 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear. The disciples approached him and said, Why do you speak to them in parables? He said to them in reply, Because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but to them it has not been granted. To anyone who has, more will be given, and he will grow rich. From anyone who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because they look but do not see, and hear but do not listen or understand. Isaiah's prophecy is fulfilled in them, which says, You shall indeed hear, but not understand. You shall indeed look, but never see. Gross is the heart of this people. They will hardly hear with their ears. They have closed their eyes, lest they see with their ears, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and be converted, and I heal them. But blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears, because they hear. Amen, I say to you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Hear then the parable of the sower. The seed sown on the path is the one who hears the word of the kingdom without understanding it, and the evil one comes and steals away what was sown in his heart. The seed sown on rocky ground is the one who hears the word and receives it at once with joy, but he has no root and lasts only for a time. When some tribulation or persecution comes because of the word, he immediately falls away. The seed sown among thorns is the one who hears the word. But then worldly anxiety and the lure of riches choke the word, and it bears no fruit. But the seed sown on rich soil is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields 100 or 60 or 30-fold. The Gospel of the Lord. It was 1942, and along with most of the rest of the world, America was at war. Things were not going well for our side, and a major reason was that the other side was remarkably good at breaking all our codes. Try as they might, no one could devise an artificial means of communication that the Japanese could not decipher. All our supposedly secret plans were an open book, and the loss of life was horrific. The situation was becoming quite desperate, and the experts were baffled about what to do. In Los Angeles, a man named Philip Johnston read about this in the newspaper, and suddenly he knew he had the solution, a very human and simple solution that, like most good solutions, had been with us all the time. Philip had the very unusual fortune of growing up on a Navajo Indian reservation, and he was fluent in the extremely difficult language of that tribe. He knew this was the key to success. A code based on this language would not be broken. Now he had to convince the military of this. They were skeptical. In all the history of warfare, he was told, this has never been done. No code, no cipher is completely secure. We change our codes frequently for this reason. But Philip was persistent. The Navajo was not a language like other languages. It consisted of very unusual sounds, not usually produced by the human voice, and sounded like the gurgling of water going down a drain. No one understood it outside the reservation, and it had never been written, so it was impossible to study and learn. Philip brought some bilingual members of the tribe to prove his idea, and they demonstrated how accurately and quickly they could transmit messages. Based at Camp Pendleton, the top-secret Code Talker project had begun. Most of these men had never been off the reservation, never traveled in a car or bus, and certainly had never seen an ocean. Now they were taking part in a war in the middle of the Pacific. It was a new universe to them. These young men were up to the task, and eventually well over 400 Navajos were trained. They became great Marines, but with a special, secret mission. The night before our troops invaded Okinawa, everyone was nervous, as this was expected to be the bloodiest landing of all. The young Navajo Marines stripped down and performed a sacred ceremonial dance, fervently asking the blessing and protection of God. Some of the other Marines scoffed at this, but sure enough, the operation turned out far easier than anticipated. Then came the famous landing at Iwo Jima. We have since learned that the entire operation was directed by Navajo code. The Navajo Marines sending and receiving over 800 messages without a single error. Without the Navajo code talkers, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. Without the code talkers, the outcome of World War II may well have been quite different. To this day, the Navajo-based code is the only spoken military code never to have been deciphered. And like so much else of greatest value, it did not have to be invented. It had been with us all along. It is just that we look but do not see. We hear but do not listen. Jesus always spoke to the crowds in code. This puzzled his inner circle of friends, for to them he spoke quite plainly. His code, too, used things that had always been around, things that they looked at every day but never really saw. His code was not an artificially created pattern of numbers and nonsense, but a living language, intelligible to hearts that were alive and open, and intelligible only to such hearts. His code consisted of parables, stories told with deep, hidden meanings. But his code was meant not to conceal the truth, but to reveal it, to open the inner eye so that people might see for the first time what lay before their eyes, to open the inner ear that they might hear the song of eternity all around them, to allow them to discover the deepest mysteries, the greatest truths hidden in the simplest things of everyday life, like seeds and weeds and birds and thorns, like fig trees and mustard trees and sheep and vineyards, to recognize the voice of God, the divine presence that had been with them all along. Blessed indeed are those eyes, because they see, and those ears, because they hear. Blessed are the code talkers and the code walkers. Blessed are the Navajo who shared their gifts for the good of all. And blessed is the God who gives those gifts for the sake of all. Blessed, too, are all to whom God whispers, with whom God walks, upon whom God smiles, in the most sacred, most ancient code of love.